Nigel Farage and Reform are surging in the national polls. We've just had a bombshell poll, this time by YouGov, which have Reform ahead of both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. This is the first time YouGov have ever had Reform number one in the polls. If you look behind the headline numbers, I'm just going to put the headline numbers on the screen for you right now. Now, if you look behind these, as I've said in my Substack newsletter, Reform is also the most popular party among the working class, more popular than Labour and the Tories among British workers, is the most popular party among men in this country, which I think is really significant. Reform is winning 1 in 4 people who voted Tory at the last election in 2024, and it's now holding nearly half of those Brexit Party voters, 46% of them. All of this is really, really significant for Nigel Farage and Reform. Why? Well, I think if you look at what Boris Johnson did in 2019, he won 76% of Leavers. Nigel Farage is now holding 46% of them. So the more that he eats into that Brexit vote, the more seats he's going to win at the next election and the more damage he's going to do to the Tories. But look, it's not just about the Tories. If you also look at the polling over the last week, Farage and Reform, they're attracting almost as much support from disillusioned Labour and Liberal Democrats as they are the Tories. And as I said, again on my Substack newsletter last week, if you look at the most favourable seats for Reform in the country, if you look at the top 100 seats for Reform at the next general election, no less than 64 of them are currently held by Labour MPs. 2/3 of Farage's top prospects are basically scattered across the Red Wall, across Wales, across Yorkshire. Lots of seats that the Westminster class are currently not looking at, but we at the Matt Goodwin Substack, we are tracking where this revolt is going to do enormous damage, which brings me to the question of why are people voting for Farage and Reform? Well, it's not really hard to figure out why Reform is doing so well in the national polls at the moment. As I've said on X, millions of hard-working, tax-paying people in this country, law-abiding people in this country are utterly frustrated and fed up with the elite status quo, the elite consensus that has been imposed on them for much of the last 30 years. Policies that have been pushed on ordinary people, that have been pushed by both the Labour Party and the Tories. And this elite consensus has been defined foremost by mass uncontrolled immigration, a disastrous policy that is making us poorer, not richer as a country, is driving crime, as we now know that from studies, and is now introducing millions of people from culturally inferior and incompatible nations into our society. It's an elite consensus that's given us broken borders, which is making a mockery of our claim to be a self-governing, independent nation which is keeping its people safe. It's an elite consensus that's allowed an assortment of murderers, rapists and criminals onto our streets, and which our so-called leaders refuse to fix because they're more interested in helping people from elsewhere in the world than protecting British families and British children here on these islands. It's an elite consensus that's also ripped open our national economy over the last 30 years to a rampant and relentless model of globalization that basically benefits a loose alliance of urban professional elites, global corporations and immigrant workers, but which is smashing the working class in this country apart, is smashing the working class's communities apart, and is hollowing out our national economy. It's also an elite consensus that would rather see Britain and British taxpayers waste billions of pounds overseas every year on foreign aid. We spend about £15.3 billion a year on foreign aid. We spend another $5.5 billion on our broken asylum system, and which is doing all of that while not redirecting that money to British taxpayers and to fixing Britain first before reaching out to the wider world. And you know, for much of the last 30 years, this broken consensus in Westminster, Oxford and Cambridge has also been imposed on the forgotten majority in this country by both left and right, by both Labour and the Tories, by the Unit Party. This isn't just about what's happening with the small boats. This isn't just about what's happening under the current government, under Keir Starmer and Labour. This is about what's been happening in this country over the last 30 years. And Labour and the Tories are both the architects of this managed decline, this decline of a once great and proud nation that you used to know and love, but which today you no longer really recognise. And so just as you'd never invite back into your home an architect who ruined and demolished your home, a home that's been loved for generations. The British people are now beginning to understand that they shouldn't invite back in the architects of all that they see around them today. This endless, unavoidable, embarrassing, never-ending national decline. The decline of a once great nation. And many people out there might not think that Nigel Farage has all the answers, and they might not think that reform is the perfect vessel. But I think what you're seeing in the national polls today is the fact that what unites millions of people in this country is a feeling that is far more powerful than any one leader or political party can convey. It can be summarized simply as this: we want our country back. We want our country back. And this is why I think we're now starting to see wholesale and historic change in the national polls. And I think soon we'll see that change in the country at local and national elections, because I think what we are about to witness in British politics over the next 5 years is not just a revolt against an out-of-touch elite minority in Westminster, but a full-scale revolution against the Uniparty, against the project it's been imposing on all of us for the last 30 years, and everything that the Uniparty stands for. That's why I think Nigel Farage and Reform are surging in the polls. As always, let me know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe. But thanks for reading and watching, and join us over at the Substack at mattgoodwin.org. You get all of my analysis right every morning. Something comes out, I share my thoughts with 70,000 people. See you soon. Bye-bye.